Consent in art, the invisible contract behind every nude photograph. There is a moment before every photograph is taken that never appears in the final image. No shutter click, no lighting setup, no composition, just a quiet agreement between two people in a room, one holding the camera, the other offering something far more fragile than their body. Trust, because what you don't see in a nude photograph is often more important than what you do. In fine art photography, nudity is never just about exposure. It is about permission layered over vulnerability, and that permission is not always as simple as a signature on a form. It can be spoken, implied, negotiated in silence, or, in the worst cases, assumed. And that is where the invisible contract begins. At its core, nude photography sits on a delicate balance of power. The photographer controls the frame, what is included, what is excluded, where the viewer's eyes will go. Even the emotional tone of the image is shaped by decisions made behind the lens. The model, meanwhile, offers something deeply personal: their physical presence, their comfort, their sense of safety in being seen. This imbalance does not automatically create harm, but it demands awareness. Because when one person directs the gaze, and another becomes the subject of that gaze, consent is not just permission to be photographed. It is ongoing negotiation, not once, not at the beginning, but throughout the entire process. In professional settings, written consent is the foundation. Release forms, contracts, agreed boundaries, these exist to define the physical and legal space of the work. But fine art does not always live neatly inside paperwork. Some of the most famous nude works in history were created in environments where formal documentation was minimal, or where artistic ambition blurred personal boundaries. And that is where the concept of implied consent has often been misunderstood. Implied consent is dangerous when it replaces communication. A model agreeing to a concept is not the same as agreeing to every variation of that concept. Comfort is not static. A person may feel safe at the beginning of a shoot and unsettled later. Light, posture, direction, and emotional tone can all shift the experience in real time. Ethical photography requires the artist to notice those shifts, not ignore them. History is filled with examples that force us to ask uncomfortable questions. In the early 20th century, artists like Egon Schiele pushed the boundaries of representation, capturing raw, often unsettling depictions of the human form. His work is now displayed in museums as expressive and important, but at the time, it raised questions about vulnerability, agency, and the limits of artistic freedom. Later, fashion photography took a different turn with figures like Helmut Newton, whose images often staged nudity in highly controlled, stylized environments. While celebrated for aesthetic power, his work also sparked debate about dominance, objectification, and the fine line between empowerment and performance. In both cases, the images survived history. But the conversations around consent and power did not disappear, they evolved. Because art does not erase ethics, it only postpones the debate. So where does art become exploitation? It is not defined by nudity itself. It is defined by control without clarity. When a subject cannot freely say no without consequence, consent becomes fragile. When boundaries are not revisited, consent becomes outdated. And when the photographer prioritizes the final image over the lived experience of the person in front of the lens, something essential is lost. Not aesthetic value, but human dignity. And yet, it is important to recognize that nude photography can also be one of the most respectful forms of artistic collaboration when done ethically. In safe, professional environments, it can become a space of trust, of agency, of reclaiming the body as something that can be seen without shame. But that only happens when consent is not treated as a single step. It is a continuous conversation, a shared responsibility, a boundary that is not drawn once, but maintained throughout the entire creative process. Because in the end, every nude photograph carries two stories: the one the viewer sees, and the one that never enters the frame. And it is in that invisible space, between trust and power, between intention and impact, that the true ethics of art are decided. Not in the image itself, but in how it was made.